Welcome to A Therapist, Buddhist, and You, brought to you by the Recovery Collective in Annapolis, Maryland. In the world of addiction recovery, few figures shine as brightly as Angel Traynor, a beacon of hope, a catalyst of change, and a tireless advocate for those navigating the challenging path to recovery. Founder and director of Serenity Sistas Sober, coordinator of Recovery Anne Arundel, and an integral person of the new Recovery Community Center, not to mention a driving force behind the Annapolis Substance Abuse Prevention Initiative, and I'm sure I'm missing much more. However, Angel wears many hats, each representing a commitment to healing and community support. This episode isn't just about Angel's impressive resume. It's an invitation to witness the transformative power of community advocacy and the vital role of recovery wraparound services. Join us as we delve into Angel's personal journey and the pivotal impact of her work at the community, private, and even government level. Through Angel's experiences and wisdom, you'll discover the profound difference that community advocacy can make in the lives of those touched by addiction. Get ready for inspiring conversation that illuminates the way forward, fostering hope and resilience in the heart of recovery. We do want to thank you guys for joining us in Season 2. We enjoyed the break after going 52-plus weeks straight, and we're certainly excited to give you all kinds of episodes, special guests, and different forms of content in 2024. There are the usual podcast episodes and articles that Zell and I write, and we will be including some other awesome informative content that we'll talk more about in the future. So please like, comment, and subscribe. It certainly helps. And collectively, we can do what we can't just do by ourselves. Okay, let's get into it with our very special guest. Angel, thanks for joining us for the first episode of Season 2. Welcome.
Thank you. You know, when you were saying all that stuff about me, I almost turned around to see who you were talking about because it still doesn't feel real, you know. almost 17 years into my recovery process, and it just blows me away, right? Yeah. That I've come from where I was to where I am. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. So 17 years, but how did you get involved in this recovery advocacy? When and how did it spark this flame in you?
You know, early in recovery, I, like so many others, I had no idea what to do with myself, where I was going to go, what I was going to do. I was 46 years old. Mm-hmm. And clueless. And, you know, I surrounded myself by a group of people, and they're like, oh, you should get your GED. And my brain tells me I'm not smart enough or funny enough, or I'm too old. And they were like, shush it, go get the GED. And I did. When I got that, the same thing about college. They're like, you should go to college. And I just never imagined myself being able to do anything like that. I mean, I started using when I was 12. Mm-hmm. By the time I was 16, I had a child. Mm-hmm. I just went through the gamut, right, with the things that women do. Mm-hmm. Abusive relationships, raising a baby alone, never feeling good enough. But I went to college. Mm-hmm. Really? Because I didn't know what else to do with myself, sure. Right?
Well, you knew what maybe not to do.
Well, yeah, by then,
recovery.
Right. By then, I knew what not to do, and I knew by then that I didn't want to do those things anymore. And I went to the community college up here, Anne Arundel, and I started classes to be an addictions counselor, because I think that that's where so many people in early recovery want to be.
Sure. There's that spark. Yep.
Sure. And I'm like, I'm going to be an addictions counselor. This is what I want to do. And I got hooked up with a work-study job, and I worked for a woman who interviewed me over the phone. I ended up in the office of substance abuse prevention. And I'm like, oh my God, she can never really know who I am, because listen, I was an addict, an active addict for 33 years. Yeah. Doesn't say a lot about prevention, right? Anyway, she hired me, and I mean, some days I was like, what am I doing here? Because I'm like making posters and cutting out construction paper. But other days she would take me to places where I'm like, oh, okay. okay, this is cool. Things like she would take me into police stations and we would do meetings there. And listen, I come in, I have a very colorful past, meaning there was a lot of law enforcement involved, right? And I started doing those things with her. And I don't know, in the 3 years that I worked for her, I was exposed to a lot of different things while going to classes still. And one of my professors, I don't even remember what the assignment was, but the professor was like, "Oh, you're going to work with women when you get out of here." And I'm like, "You're nuts. I'm never going to work with women. No." And, she followed me through, and she turned into a mentor for me, that professor, and exposed me to some really cool things when it comes to prevention and trauma, crisis, like all of those things. So I was interested, but I still didn't believe that I was good enough or that I would ever be able to do anything like that.
So that was like 2008-ish, right? 2008, 2009.
2007, yeah. Yeah, around 2009, I guess, right? That boss at the college sent me to a meeting one day. She was like, "I can't go. I need you to stand in for me." And by then I knew well enough to say, "Okay, boss, whatever you say." And I went to, it was the health department up in Glen Burnie. And I walk into this room and there's like 9 or 10 people sitting around the table. When I saw them, it was a former CO, a former PO, a former addictions counselor, my very first pretrial worker. There's all of these people at the table and I was petrified. But I knew that if I didn't go in, she would be upset. So I went in, kept my head low. Really what kept me there was I have a very good friend, musician here in Annapolis, and he was at the table. And I was like, all right, maybe I can do this. So that was, at the time, it was called Recovery-Oriented System of Care. The health department took care of it, and it's grown into much more. But what happened to me there was I started to find my voice. My personal belief is that when we are in active addiction or early in recovery, we don't know what our voice is. We haven't experienced being able to use it. And I found that. During that time, I picked up that degree for addictions counseling. I picked up another human services, but I also picked up a degree. It was human services with the social law. And that's when I started learning about advocacy and about how the world really worked.
Sure. The red tape.
So policy, legislature, like all of that. And I was hooked. A lot happened during that time, like between 2009, 2012. The recovery, that ROSC is called Recovery Anne Arundel now. I became very involved with that, which is deep in the community, helping to reduce stigma, highlight recovery. I became very involved with them.
You're the coordinator, but we'll get to that.
I hold that at like the highest honor in the world, right? But I was also introduced to recovery coaching at the time. And I started seeing the difference between addictions counseling and recovery coaching, right? And we're both guides, but I'm like a thigh high in the muck, let's get to it kind of girl. And I went with the recovery coaching and I was hooked. I still have those degrees. I've never, ever used them. They hang very nicely on my mother's
piece of paper. Yeah.
My mother's
I'm familiar with
wall
the pieces of paper.
In her extra bedroom. It's a good time.
So it's just interesting how you don't realize that this is molding your eventual career professionally, among other things. Yeah.
God, I've had some of the most amazing experiences since then. I'm from Annapolis. I'm an Annapolitan through and through. And I can tell you that pre-recovery, a lot of the officers on the force knew my name. They knew me by face. And
Annapolis is a small town pretty quickly.
It's pretty small. It is pretty small, right? Once I entered into recovery and I started doing community work, I have been able to like relink with some of those officers. And I get to see the other side, right? I was never one of those people that when I was arrested, I was never a kicker or a scratcher or a spitter. I never did any of that. But I get to see the other side, right? And understand that there's a really important place for that meeting in the middle between law enforcement and those of us in recovery.
I just think it's so fascinating that so early, probably didn't look at it as your career yet, but in your job, you saw police officers and a meeting. Is it Providence? Is it odd? Is it God? But whatever it was, it led to a spark. So talk more about that. What are some of the advocacy that, is it training? Is it them understanding? Where have you took that in your advocacy?
So first, I think that both sides need to see the other side as human, right? Because we're all human.
Absolutely.
One of the first officers that I came into contact with, I was in a meeting with that boss. There was a horrific and very tragic accident that happened on Route 50 during that time. And it was a carload of kids and it was terrible. And I go into that meeting, they start talking about that because with substance abuse prevention and working with youth, which is one of the things that I do today, we talk about binge drinking, underage drinking, right? Car-related crashes. This big burly cop comes in, he's in a suit, and he starts talking about that accident. And everybody in the room knew about it because it really impacted this area. And he started talking about the fact that he was chasing behind the car of kids. They were going the wrong way on 50 but he couldn't follow them too closely and he couldn't stop what he watched happen in front of him. He could not stop it. And he started crying. And I was deeply impacted by that because what I realized is that he's just human. Today, he's one of my closest friends in law enforcement. And through everything that I've been in my past life, watching them, thinking poorly of them, all of the things that come along with the way we think about law enforcement sometimes, but being able to work with them on the other side in the community and understanding that they're just humans too, right? I think that has a lot to it, but they also get to see me as human, right? And I say this all the time. I mean, with the officers that I work with the director of crisis, with anybody at crisis that I come into contact with, like, I like giving them wins, right? Because we don't get a lot of wins when we're working in this.
That keeps us going.
Area. And the wins is what keeps us going. So it's like, it's always an honor for me to work side by side with law enforcement. I was just actually put into the position of being the co-chair for the Annapolis Police Foundation. And I'm like, all right.
Full circle, are we?
Okay, full circle. We like that.
Speaking of full circle, I wanted to say that when I was, I think I was only a few months in my recovery journey, and you were the speaker at that popular or highly attended meeting. This was like 9 years ago. And I remember you from there because you had a color, some kind of color in your hair back then. And I really appreciate what you're saying about your journey, which is an important piece for people who are struggling with addiction, which is about like recovery is not about just not doing, but like doing something else that's meaningful and purposeful. Sounds like that's what you found as well that kept you going,
It is. You're absolutely right. And I say this all the time, like we have to have something to do when we enter into recovery. I mean, in active addiction, I was always somebody's mom, somebody's caseload, somebody's girlfriend. I just didn't know what my purpose was. And what I have found over and over and over in almost 17 years of working with individuals is we have got to help them find their purpose. We have to help them find their voice. Because once you find your voice, if you use it properly, it can make change. And I know this. I know this to be true because I've seen it happen.
So you brought that up, the Annapolis Police Foundation, their mission to support the Annapolis Police Department directly with resources and strengthen it and augment its services to the community. So that's kind of where you roll in, right? Tell us about the Annapolis Police Foundation and some of the work that you're doing with them.
Well, for the first time in my life, I had on a ball gown. Right? I'm not much of a ball gown girl. I don't, if you look at me now, I'm in sweatpants and sweatshirt, with no shoes because I deeply despise shoes. But we did black tie and diamonds with the Rotary Club, right? To raise money to help the police department. We want to buy a van, right, for transporting kids to and from some of the programs. I mean, some of the programs are chess, volleyball. Yeah. They do after-school studies. There's a boxing club. So really, we're there to support them in the initiatives that they are doing in the community.
That's great. You've been involved with the county for so long, from 10, 15 years ago to now. What kind of education or information or perspective have you helped give the police department understanding addiction and things related to recovery or active use? Hey listeners, we've got something extraordinary to share, a chance to reshape your journey no matter where you are. You're familiar with Zalmal's insights on our podcast, but there's more. Through the Recovery Collective, he offers life, mindfulness, recovery coaching, and meditation groups guiding you toward a fulfilled and mindful existence, no matter your location. Zal's journey from a Burmese Buddhist novice to a skilled practitioner equips him with timeless wisdom and contemporary strategies. Whether you're navigating life's shifts, seeking clarity, or pursuing self-awareness, Zal's coaching serves as a compass guiding you toward success. The best part? Zal's approach centers on your growth and empowerment. He equips you with tools to tap into your inner strengths for continuous evolution no matter where you are. Ready to take that next step in your personal growth journey? Connect with Zalmal and the Recovery Collective at 240-813-8135 from anywhere in the world. Investigating in your journey reaps immeasurable rewards. Let Zalmal guide you toward resilience, clarity, and empowerment no matter where life finds you. Now, let's transition back into our conversation. Stay tuned, stay curious, and keep your journey growing.
I have to say that it really started, I used to sit on a panel, the Not My Child panel. That started in 2015 when people started realizing that the overdoses were going up and that fatalities were going up. And
quickly.
And quite honestly, it started hitting, the opioid epidemic started hitting families that you would not, people just wouldn't think it's going to happen there.
Hence the name, the title. Oh, well, that can happen, but not my child.
Yeah, not my child.
That wouldn't happen to my child. So the stigma, the denial.
Absolutely. That denial's, that's something else, right? Because I know from my own mother, who was a single mom, she raised me for a long time, and and then she married a man that became my stepfather for a lot of years. But my mom, my own mother, when she had to really look at my addiction when I was 44, 45, 46 years old, she had to take a look at herself, right? What did she do wrong? Where did she go wrong? Things like that. And that for a parent is tough. What I've had to teach my mom, help to educate her, is that there's nothing wrong with her. There was nothing wrong with me. There was nothing wrong with me. It's what happened to me. Yeah. What happened to me to make me go down that route, right? What was the trauma? Yeah. So it's tough, right, with parents. Like, I understand that. I really do. But that Not My Child panel, we became like a family.
And this is a panel that would be held at high schools and ultimately middle schools with quote-unquote professionals, police officers, people in recovery that would talk to
clinicians.
Students.
And we became like a family. I mean, I don't know how many of those sessions I did with officers, with state's attorneys, with crisis, with all of those people. And just taking that information into the community and educating. It's all about education, right? We cannot fault somebody for not knowing something.
Correct.
Once you educate them, now I can be like, remember
That's
that,
right. Now it's a choice.
Now it's a choice, exactly. So working with law enforcement, it's just one of my greatest pleasures. It really is. That is where, so Recovery Anne Arundel, when it started as that ROSC, it was under the auspice of the health department. And the gentleman that headed it up was smart enough to know that it belonged in the hands of the community, not the hands of the government. His name was George Phillips Jr. And George was all about like getting the information out, reducing stigma. We started the annual recovery walk. So we're going into the 12th year for that.
That's awesome.
And we're going along, and it just hit me one day. I'm like, how do we expect to educate people and let them know that we do recover, right? We're out there. We do recover. Oddly enough, we recover and we vote, right?
And we thrive. We're active.
Yeah,
we were active in addiction. We use that energy for good when we're in the recovery process.
Oh my God. People in recovery are some of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life. But I'm like, how do we expect to just do one event and have people remember us? That doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Again, I recover out loud. I found my voice. I use it. And I use it to mobilize people as well. So I was like, what about a basketball game between the county police department and a group of guys in recovery? Like, how cool is that?
That's
right?
Awesome.
So now
both are competitive.
and it's weird, right? Because that first year I'm like, how is this really going to work? Like, are they going to get along? Like, what's going to happen out there? I have never seen, well, I'm not much of a sports girl, but I don't think I've ever seen so much togetherness on a basketball court. Because they came together, man, because they're humans. It's at the end of the day, they're humans, right? We're going into our 6th year of that event. And both the county police department and the guys in recovery love that event.
It's passionate. It's unity.
Oh my God. Well, and listen, I don't know if you know this or not, but people that are in recovery are like highly competitive, right? Highly competitive. And so we took the trophy last year, and this year, the game is in April. Oddly enough, I think it's April the 20th. Don't quote me on that because I could be wrong. But the police department's coming to get that trophy back. They want it back.
That's right.
So
gosh, we're organically, we've hit, and we're going to do deeper with Mr. George Phillips here in a second, but you've talked about the Office of Substance Abuse Education and the Recovery Walk, and that's an annual event that's in downtown Annapolis to raise awareness. We've talked about ROSC. You haven't touched Serenity Sistas yet. Talk to us about that. That started 2012-ish?
2012, 2013. I knew that there was a gap, right, in housing for women. I knew that there was no housing in Annapolis for women. The closest thing we had was the Chrysalis House. And sometimes women didn't fit the criteria, because they
Correct.
didn't have a child or
Yep.
whatever the reason. So I made the decision that I was going to open a recovery house in Annapolis for women. And it's only through the grace of everything that I am not, right? Right. It's only through the grace of God that it all came together. I was literally a starving college student, right? I think the first batch of money that I got, I took out a Pell Grant. I'm probably still paying it off, but it's fine. It's fine, right? But through the kindness of a family whose son was in recovery, they rented me a townhouse. They knew what we were doing. They were behind us. Layaway angels. These are people that like go into Kmart's or wherever they do layaway. I had put beds on layaway, and layaway angels went in and paid it off.
Wow.
Furniture was donated from family and friends, and it just all came together. And for the first month, I had one girl there, and she's like, "Is anybody ever gonna come and live with us?" And I'm like, "They'll come. We're building it. They're gonna come." And
how
they did.
needed it is in every community.
Yeah.
Especially for women, a safe cultural recovery, safe place with a mindset. I can live here. I can put my head to bed. I don't have to worry about anything but myself and my safety and my recovery, and the culture is good. For that to be lacking in so many areas, especially, well, now it's Annapolis is so rich in the recovery community, but the houses that you built and created, and I'll say it this way, you set up the conditions, is a huge reason why the recovery is so rich here.
I believe in recovery. I believe that everybody is worthy of recovery. I believe that everyone deserves a safe place to lay their head and a safe place to live, right? And to thrive, right? It's not just about surviving in recovery. It's about thriving.
That's right.
And, house one came along. 14 months later, house two came along, house three. And it's funny because that professor that I told you about, the one that was like, "You're going to work with women." And I'm like, "No, I'm not."
She's doing something in scenario.
that first grand opening of that house, she showed up and she laughed and she laughed and she laughed and she said, "I told you." But I just, once it all started, I knew that I was in the right place, and I knew that I was doing the right thing. And that was probably the first time in a very long time that I knew deep down inside that I was where I belonged. Yeah. And then all of a sudden somebody's like, "You should open a men's house." And I'm like, "I don't want to work with men." And then they're like, "You should open a women and children's house." And I'm like, children are sticky and they're, but I did open a women and children's house, and we opened up a men's house. And pre-COVID, we were up to 7 locations. And, COVID changed everything for all of us.
Yes,
right?
it did.
I don't know one person that was not impacted by COVID.
Yeah.
And
Trying to figure it out in live real time was looking back is going, wow, we got through that. Whew.
yeah, and I think about that. How many businesses were shut down? How many people couldn't go to work? How many persons early in recovery were back to isolation, which is the worst thing in the world you can do for an addict. Oh God, new in recovery, that's a terrible time. I say it all the time. I've got some girls that got clean on the screen, right, because of Zoom. But we were impacted and we were knocked back, right? We were knocked down to 4 locations, because somewhere in there, in all of that, somebody was like, "Oh, you should open up a crisis stabilization location." And I'm like, I know. I'm not clinical. I can't do that. But I did. We opened up a stabilization location for safe stations. And, everything just... Some people say to me, "You're so lucky." I'm like, it's divine intervention. I mean, I believe that my path was laid long before.
Providence. God has a path.
Yeah.
We can step off it, but God has a path.
Oh, yeah. I stepped off of it, rolled down a few hills. I mean,
it might be divine intervention, but it can also be a labor of love.
Well, and then people are like, "You're so lucky." And I'm like, bro. You have no idea how many phone calls I take at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, how many parents I talk to that are just at the end of their rope. And, I mean, when I leave you here today, I'm going back home to do some billing. Sure. Like, it's not all glory, right? And it's not all fame. And I mean, it's all a labor of love for me because I know this is where I'm supposed to be. So we've grown. We've been kicked down a little bit by COVID. We're back to growing again.
Once again, we're organically just going to, here's something else that Angel has helped in the community, in the recovery community. And a crisis stabilization bed, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's intense.
It's crisis.
Intense, right?
Crisis stabilization is like, hey, before someone finds their place, where's a safe place for them to be until an opening is going up for whether it's a residential, a detox, an inpatient, you name it. I mean, that's a very, what word do I want to use? Tough time for people.
It's not a good time.
Yeah, it's the nightmare that the client and the family are living in. That's my language, right? But that's the nightmare time for family in the attic.
I'm definitely hearing an overarching theme in your story, the way it has unfolded, which is what you were saying in the beginning about the humanness, that everybody's human. So like starting with your own story, and then law enforcement people are human, addicts are human, but also women are human. And then men are human. And then, so like there's that theme, which really is the essence of recovery from my experience too, is that as an addict or just as a human being, sometimes when we're very selfish, I feel invisible or either I'm invincible. Like there's a disconnection from my humanness. So like everything that you've described about thriving in recovery is all about like that human connection. And then it's more like a sustainable way of staying sober. Yeah. Otherwise, just like a ticking bomb. I'm still not in tune with my humanness. I still think everybody else is selfish and I still feel selfish. There's that like wall in between. So like it really captures the whole essence of recovery, the way your story is unfolding, and it won't stop, right? Like you said, there is that power behind everything that is making everything happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's the wins too, though. It's the wins. I recently readmitted a young lady into one of our female sober houses, and I don't get as much interaction with our residents as I once did because I get to do the billing end and all of that stuff. But I've got a great staff, and one of my staff called me and she was like, "Hey, you need to reach out to her. She would like to tell you something." So I called her and she said to me, first of all, "Thank you for allowing me to come back." And she said to me, "I will never, ever forget you because you took an Easter when I was, the name of that crisis house was the Hoyle House." She said, "You took your Easter and I was at the Hoyle House. I was the only person there besides staff, and you came and you had dinner with me and you gave up time with your family, and I will never forget that." That's the human.
Yeah, that's the grace. That's the connection.
Yeah. So, it's things like that. And I want to be a recovery carrier. That's what I want to do. I want to carry recovery. So I try to teach, and like each one of those people that I come into contact with, that this is what it's all about. This is where you find your voice. This is how you can use your voice. Recently, I was approached by the county. "Hey, you've been really successful at running a women and children's house," right? Because we've done that since 2015. They're like, "What about a men's house, a men and children's house?" Now, I've known for years that is an non-served,
non-existent
population, right? And there are a lot of dads out there, due to the opioid crisis, now have their children because they have to. And I don't say that in a callous way. I'm saying mom's not present, and dad has the children, and dad has to take care of them. And they're like, how do you feel about that? And I said, well, I've been saying it for years. Like, let me take a crack at it. So Serenity Sistas will open up the first men and children's house in the state of Maryland. So we're, it's all that stuff excites me. I'm like, all right, let's do it. And we're also reopening Hoyle House, but only for women. I can't do women and men. No, thank you.
After all these years, you've gained relationships and collaboration with the city of Annapolis, Anne Arundel County, and others. How did you get these collaborations, connections with at the county and city level?
People say to me all the time, oh my gosh, you're so involved. And I'm like, no, I'm just real nosy. I'm just really nosy, right? And I want to know. But really the reason I want to know those people is because I want to help educate them. And I learned that in 2015 when I was going through that whole, the Not My Child panel, realizing how many of our decision makers don't understand, or they don't know, or they have their own family secrets that they don't particularly want to talk about.
No doubt.
Right?
Yeah.
And I mean,
we're all affected.
Every single one of us. I have not met one person yet that has not been impacted by substance misuse.
Yep.
And
throw in mental health on top of it, then it's compounded.
I mean,
we're all affected.
People either don't want to talk about it, they're afraid to talk about it, they're afraid of judgment. The stigma is ridiculous.
And our own personal stigma as well.
Well, you're right. We stigmatize ourselves, and we, even in the recovery community, you'll find it sometimes. But what really got me was I was working under an administration, and somebody brought this house to me, and they're like, hey, you should take a look at it. It's in Pasadena. They call it the compound. It's for sale. You should go and look at it. And I did, and it was definitely a compound, but it was in a community in Pasadena. I'm like, all right, let's give it a whirl. I mean,
I remember this.
Okay. Somebody was angry with me and started going into the community and saying that I was going to open a rehab there. I do not run rehabs. No. I am not clinical. I'm peer-based. And the community invited me in for a brief conversation with 6 to 8 community members. And I'm like, all right, sure. I'm an open book.
It's connection, right? Oh, easy peasy.
I'm an open book. I'm like, all right. So I took one of my employees and my mom, who at the time was probably 70, 71. And my mother's one of my biggest advocates today. And she went, and I walked into the room, and there were, it was not 6 to 8 people. There were 40 to 60 people there at least. And they were angry, right? And I sat there for 45 minutes, literally taking shots from the community and some of the words that they threw out that were just not kind. And, you're going to have mother and children. Our children can't play with their children. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
It's hard to have grace for that type of. Yeah.
And I'm just trying to be nice and answer the questions, right? Because I don't want to be perceived as that person, because I quickly remember at the deep down core of me, I'm still Angel. Yeah. And I still have that.
I can come out.
What I had in the street, I still have that, right? Yeah. And I know that about myself, and I don't want to be perceived. I don't want to be that woman. I was trying to answer their questions. I was being very kind. My poor mom, I'm looking at her. She's petrified because she's watching her daughter and this other girl take shots, right? And it finally took the employee to say to me, how long are you going to fucking sit here and listen to this? And I'm like, I snapped out of it. What happened with that is there was a delegate that was there in the audience who, politicians have to remain neutral. They can't go on one side or the other, right? So he was very neutral. He lived in the neighborhood. But there was also a woman there from the county executive's office who called me the next day. In fact, I think Nick called me as well. And they both said, I am deeply, deeply sorry for what happened to you last night, what happened to your employee, what happened to your mom. I'm very sorry. Can we talk? That's where I found my love for politics and how do we educate them in a way that we're not called those people.
It's the other side of advocacy. That's the gap, the stigma, the resistance, the fear that comes out in anger. That's the other side of advocacy that I'm glad you shared that with us, because with all the, I'll call it wins, but positive forward momentum, there are a lot of those stories in your 10, 12, 15, 17 years.
Oddly enough, I end up in places where I'm like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
How did I get here? And I get to go in and I get to talk to our delegates today and my senator and my county executive. And it's so weird for me because they'll be like, you're the expert on this. And I'm like, again, I'm going to look behind me and say, are you talking to me? Like, I'm just a girl, man. I'm just a girl trying to stay sober today, But it all comes from finding my voice and using my voice in the right way. That's what it comes down to.
So let's take that to a win. And I know you hold Mr. George Phillips Jr. in high regard. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about the upcoming Recovery Community Center in the works?
Through COVID, we found out that we already know, right? We already know that isolation is a terrible place to be for us. But there are those of us maybe who have been in the recovery process longer to understand how slippery and how dangerous isolation can be.
I remember peak COVID lockdown. I'm painting the wall of my house and going, I got to show up on this Zoom for this person celebrating, because I couldn't imagine having an anniversary on Zoom a year and a half later, still on Zoom, and that isolation and trying to find ways to connect. So sorry to interrupt, but keep going.
It's okay though, because it's so true, right? What I saw in our houses was, now we've got jobs have shut down, 12-step meetings have shut down. We're told to isolate, to stay in our homes.
Don't touch
anyone. Listen, I am a hugger, right? And all of that, like we're told, don't. So what I started to see was my own residents suffering. And I knew that something had to be done, wasn't sure how to get there. Again, through a series of events, Anne Arundel County at one point was one of 15 communities chosen in the United States to work with facing addiction. It was all technical assistance, but assistance, right? How to community organize. I was still learning then. And Anne Arundel County was supposed to come up with one goal that we wanted to accomplish. We're super passionate here in Anne Arundel, right?
One goal.
So we came up with two.
There you go.
And
it'll funnel it down to two.
One was, you may have seen the accordion resource guide. So we have an accordion resource guide, and we came up with that. If you ever want something done and you want it done efficiently and quickly, find yourself some moms, because the moms are the best, man. And
can't deny it.
Man, this group of moms, they come up with this thing, and it's, to date, we have distributed over 25,000 of those little pamphlets.
Yeah.
Right?
And people struggle with resources, referrals, continuum of care services? Where do we look? So that's so valuable.
It's wallet sized. I'm sure I don't have one because I give them out everywhere. And then the second was a recovery community center, a place that people could go to get wraparound services. And when I say wraparound services, I mean, we come in with things like we don't have a driver's license. We need a social security card. We don't know how to write a job resume, life skills, all of those things, right?
It's not the drinking and drugging that necessarily will get us to relapse. It's the life stuff is why so many people relapse. Yeah,
absolutely. And how to handle that, and talking about relapse prevention. And so we're like, okay, now we have our goals. How do we get there? What do we do? And a group of us. I do nothing by myself. I always have a group of people that I collaborate with. And a grant came up through the state of Maryland, and it was a very unique grant. It was a brick and mortar acquisition, which you very rarely find those. And a group of us wrote this grant, and we were awarded the grant, and then COVID hit. So we have this money, but we can't really do anything with it because, well, we're not doing anything. And like I said, that's when I really started to see our residents suffering. Yeah. They were suffering. Sometimes they didn't even know they were suffering, right? Yeah. They had no idea. They just know that they've got this inner whatever it is that's going on, making me feel terrible about myself. Yeah. And we, as a team at Serenity Sistas, kicked it into action. Emptied out the lower level of one of our houses of beds. We put the beds in other places, and we opened up a pilot project. And we could only use it for our residents, right? Mm-hmm. But our residents could go there and get those things. And it was super successful.
What wonderful clientele for a pilot program.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, everything just worked out really well. We found the first location during all of this. I loved the buildings. It was 2 buildings connected. They're on West Street. My team is like, those are fire traps. I love this building. And they're like, COVID really hit. We lost some financial backing from private investors. Anyway, then, the story goes on. We found another place. If you know Annapolis, it's always parking, right? Always. Parking's always tragic.
It's good for horses, but not for...
Yeah. This city was like, nope, you don't have enough parking there. And then we found the 3rd building. We're right where we're supposed to be, right? We got a great building. It's in a great location. We have backing from our alderwoman. We have backing from the mayor, the county exec, police chief. Like, we have the backing from the Office of Emergency Management. We had to do some work. Everything was slow because, again, we're talking about COVID. Mm-hmm. So people are working remotely, which means the guy that pushes the little inspection things that you put in the window, he's not there. And so it took time. And during all of that time, I'm making friends, right? Mm-hmm. That's when I decided I need to make friends with that senator and some other people. We struggled with the name. What are we going to call it? Community center? What are we going to call it? I have a woman that I work really closely with. Jennifer Wheeler is she's my recovery wife. That's what I call her. She has a whole other life over there. She's not really my wife, but we work real close. And we were holding a recovery Anne Arundel meeting one day, and another woman that we knew walked in, and I'm like, what is she doing here? Like, why is she here? And she walked up to me during the meeting, and she was like, hey, I want to remind you that today is the 1-year anniversary of George Phillips Jr. passing. Oh. And it all came flooding back to me. George Phillips Jr., the very first time that I was incarcerated, that I was arrested, I'm going to date myself, and because you could still smoke at the detention center then. You were in pods with bars, and I woke up at like 2 a.m. to somebody yelling my name, Traynor, need you down here. And I walked down there. I'm like, what time is it? He's like, it's 2 a.m., ma'am. And I'm like, okay, how can I help? And there's this young African-American gentleman. He's got a 5-gallon bucket turned upside down. He's sitting on it with his little clipboard on his arm. He's got his hat on backwards, which I've come to find out is called a Kangol. Mm-hmm. And George Phillips Jr., and I am your pretrial worker, ma'am. You will report to me. And, he was very jovial about his job at 2 a.m. And I'm like, okay, whatever you say. Here's the crazy thing. George was my first pretrial worker, right? As I went downhill in my addiction, I crossed paths with George, who was on his way up through the health department. Pretrial worker. He was a counselor for me at one point. He was that guy that was sitting at the head of the ROSC table. And he was smart, man. He was a great mentor. He was not in recovery, but he understood those that needed that, right?
Clearly had the passion for it.
Oh my God. I mean, and these are the things that have happened to me over and over in my lifetime, right? That's how I know it's divine. That's how I know that the walk that I walk is divine.
It's funny,
anyway.
Funny that you say that because
Yes?
he implemented the programs Walk the Walk.
He did.
Yeah.
He absolutely did, right? And when I went to that first recovery Anne Arundel meeting, I was like, I wanted to cover my face, right? I kept my head down and I'm like, oh my God, it's Mr. Phillips of all people, Mr. Phillips. And I went and I sat down. I didn't say a thing for like the first 3 months that I was there. And finally he walked up to me after a meeting and he was like, Miss Traynor? And I'm like, hi, Mr. Phillips, right? And he's like, oh my God, you look so different. And I was like, well, and I explained to him I was a couple of years into the recovery process. And he was like, thank God you're here. We need the voice of recovery. And that's when I started realizing that what we have to say can be useful. So, going back to that meeting and that woman getting in my ear and saying, I just wanted to let you know this is the 1-year anniversary of George passing, it struck me right then and there. And I went to my good friend Jen after that meeting and I'm like, the whole group got together and we sent a video message to George's wife and his daughters. And I was like, there's the name. George Phillips Jr. Recovery Community Center. It could never be named anything but.
Beautiful.
So.
Beautiful.
Yeah, switching gears a little bit or pausing a little bit. I'm really curious. I think I must ask, as a person in recovery and also you being in recovery, you're very busy. You get involved. Other things that you do for yourself, like how do you unwind in your downtime? I think that would be good for people who are in recovery listening as well, because self-care has been a big part of the recovery journey as well. So I want to take space and talk about that a little bit too.
Thank you, because sometimes I have to have my friends remind me, right, to, why don't you calm down? Just calm down, Angel. Definitely, I give my hand at meditation every single morning. Not great at it, but I take that time to sit with self. I have a network of women in my life, that both in recovery and out of recovery, that know me, and I'll spend time with my girlfriends. Probably the biggest thing for me, Zal, is music. I'm an old deadhead, been a deadhead for lots of years. People are like, oh, that's why you don't wear shoes. And I'm like, no, I'm just more comfortable barefoot, right? I feel more grounded when I'm barefoot. I'm an old deadhead. And when I entered recovery, I thought, I'm never going to be able to go to another concert. I'm just not ever going to be able to do those things. And about 3 years into my recovery, I was telling one of my normal friends this, who also is an old deadhead. She was like, Angel, you're a dum-dum. And I'm like, that's what I'm talking about. That's why I can't do that. And she was like, don't you know about the wharf rats?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, no idea. And she was like, girl, you've never seen the yellow balloons at a show? And I'm like, yeah, but that's not the kind of balloon I was thinking it was, though, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking it was that parking lot balloon. And she was like, no, there's a whole group of people at dead shows that have a meeting at every intermission. And I'm like, oh my God. And I found that, right? And I found my people at that very first show that I went to. And what I've come to realize is that wharf rats, we're everywhere, right? There are wharf rats everywhere. And that's what they call a deadhead in recovery, is a wharf rat. But it's not just the dead that I follow. I follow a lot of other bands, and I do a lot of other live music. And artists themselves are either in recovery or they recognize that we need a safe space.
We're so much more vocal about it.
Right? So that right there tells me that stigma is diminishing in that way, right? And that we're recognized. And the biggest thing for me is that we don't have to stay secretive anymore, right? We recover out loud. You recover out loud. But that's a big part of my self-care. Do not tempt me with a good time. I will get into a plane, a train, or an automobile to go to live music.
Love it. I'll talk
Yeah, I
more
think that's
about
very
that
important.
after the episode. My brain's getting going. Go ahead, Saul.
I think that's important about because everything that you've said has been about empowerment, like empowering people who have lost their voices, lost their feelings, lost their sense of belonging. But then recovery is powerful in terms of finding our true self. And then having fun and being sober are not mutually exclusive. I can have fun and be sober. That's been the most exciting things that I've seen in my own life in recovery, and also with people too. Yeah. And I feel because in addiction we put our behavior, our addiction first, as opposed to things that I wanted to do. So it's been always fun to see people reconnecting with their hobbies, their creative outlets, things like that, finding more meaning and purpose. So it's great that you share about music being something that rejuvenate you.
Yeah, it's something that we can do, right? And I don't know. I would have to say another part of that self-care is reconnecting with my family. My grandmother, my mother's mother, is 101 years old. Sassy. Oh, is she sassy, man. Every morning my gram gets up and she dresses herself and makes her bed, makes her own coffee. She's in recovery, right? So my grandmother got sober when she was 50. And wow. Being able to connect with her and talk about recovery. And apparently housing runs in the blood. Skips a generation because my mother doesn't want anything to do with it, and nor does my son. Yeah. But my grandmother ran a halfway house in Laurel, Maryland, 50 years ago.
Wow.
Right? So it's in the blood. But that's, for me, that's part of self-care, is being able to connect with my aunts and my uncles and my mom, and be able to heal the trauma that I caused, right? My son, Jonathan, is 46 years old. And it's taken years to repair that damage. I work with women who have had their children taken from them. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I would have done if my son had been taken from me. I have one biological child, 2 foster sons, and I raised a nephew. I put those kids through hell. What's worse, being taken away from your mother, or being laying in your bed when the SWAT team comes through the door?
Yeah, that imprinted wreckage. Yeah,
right. It's just wreckage. So I've had an opportunity to heal that, and that healing is part of self-care for me. That being at peace, right? Because I can be at peace with the things that I did. I know today that my addiction does not define me, right? My past does not define who I am I'll never forget that part of me, right? Because the minute I lose that is the minute that this person in recovery is in trouble.
Really good stinking thinking. Yeah. I can't help to think, me as a former clinical director and always on call and adults bringing up the self-care. And you've already given one answer, which is a good support team and you don't do anything alone. So I might be answering it, but how do you not take all of this on yourself? You've gone through COVID and you're director with this and the creator of that. And how do you separate when you need to separate? Because part of what this episode's about is do your own advocacy, no matter how big or small. So people are hearing this like, oh my God, how in the world does she have enough time? How do you separate that when you need to separate that and not own it?
So in the last couple of years, I have learned to say no.
It's a sentence.
Right? No is a complete sentence. Man, when I heard that, I'm like, really? It has a period after it? All right, then. I've learned to say no. I have definitely learned that I am not invincible. I think that for me anyway, I came into recovery and I felt like I had wasted so much time that I had so much to catch up on, right? I have so much to do, so much to catch up on. But over the last couple of years, like I've realized like my mortality. I'm 61, right? And although in my head I am still 17 sometimes.
Yeah, maybe 30. I never would have guessed 61, but hey.
You
got
know,
enough energy for
I don't know about anybody else in this world, but I did not take good care of my body when I was out there doing those things. And so I'm waiting for this hip replacement. But I can tell you that for the first couple years that it started to really go bad, I was like, stop being a baby. Just stop being a baby. Stop whining. Go take some more Tylenol. You know what I mean? Like, not realizing that there was truly something wrong.
Here's a sign. Here's a symptom.
But I've learned a little bit more about my mortality, and I've learned that I didn't cause it, I can't cure it, and I damn sure can't control it. Right? I've learned all of that in the last few years when it comes to this realm that that I work and I live in. Now, don't get me wrong. I have had my heart absolutely shattered into a million pieces with some of the people that I have lost on this journey. If you had told me almost 17 years ago that I would be an ordained minister, which means I could marry people.
That's right.
But it also means that there's a potential that I would bury people, right? And that I would give eulogies. And that, to me, is of the highest honor that I will ever have put on me, right? Is for somebody to ask me to do a eulogy for a family member. And I've just come to realize that with the very high highs, there are going to be lows, and that I have to try to remain in the middle somehow. So how do I do it? I don't know. Prayer. There's a lot of prayer there. And I mean those deep, meaningful prayers for me, especially in the morning, before I get out of bed, right?
Yeah.
Because once I hit the floor, like I'm either going to hit the floor and the hip's going to be in a lot of pain, or I'm going to hit the ground running. I don't know. But that's self-care. And I push self-care. I push self-care on my employees. Yeah. I mean, I've got a great staff right now, and they know that I'm serious about that self-care. If I see that they're struggling at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm like, get out. I need to, because some of them are single moms. I don't care about the money. Clock out at 4. Get out now.
Yeah.
Go take care of yourself. Go, whatever it takes. Take a drive, whatever it takes. So.
Well, looking ahead, what are some of your hopes and visions for the future of recovery support and advocacy, whether it's an Annapolis community or at more of a meta macro level? Take it where you want.
So Annapolis, in my opinion, is very recovery rich.
Oh,
right?
we were saying that.
We're so
lucky.
blessed.
We're fortunate. Part of some of the things that you have helped set up the conditions for, but go ahead.
But even before that, thinking back historically, we're recovery rich, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to 12-step meetings and all of that. Like we've got that here. Because I've traveled parts of the country where they don't
Sparse.
have that, right? You have to drive 90 minutes to get to a meeting.
Yeah.
So we're very recovery rich here. For that, I am grateful. There are things in this area that we work in that displease me. If it was just me that it affected and displeased, I would say, what's wrong with you, Angel? But I see injustices happening, and so there's a group of us that work for that. Whether it's poor housing conditions, poor treatment of individuals who are at their very most vulnerable stage of their life.
Yeah.
There's a group of us that advocate, right, at the policymaker level to make things right. Statewide, if I personally could get them all into a room and help to educate them, like that would be the bee's knees right there.
Yeah.
And again, I've been in the room with mayors and county executives and lieutenant governors and things like that. But to really help them to understand.
This is bipartisan.
I want to scream out the truth. But what I've learned is that truth without compassion is just cruel. Just cruel.
Yeah.
I have to have the compassion for them that maybe they don't understand, or maybe they're fighting it in their own family and they're afraid to talk about it. I don't know. But if I could get the state on the same level, on the same page, that would be great. I work with the Maryland Recovery Advocacy Project to help with those things. I have some of the most amazing people in my life. I have a woman who has lost 2 daughters to this disease, and she's gone to the federal level and fought the Sacklers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't know, where do I see it? I just wish that the stigma wasn't there, that people were more understanding. And that really, overall, that we lived in a society that was a little more peaceful. Not sure where that's going to go, but all right.
Well, thank you for doing your part for that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great having you. And again, full circle. Good to have you here after so many years. And I've seen you active in recovery as I'm active in recovery. And I like the note that you're ending on, which is compassion, which is also part of recovery too. One of the biggest prayer in 12-step talks about it's better to understand than to be understood. I feel like that's a good guiding principle too when communicating the truth. That I want to say the truth, but then I want to understand the other person first before saying the truth. Otherwise, it can be, like you said, cruel.
Yeah.
But only if I understand other people, the truth can be communicated with compassion. So that's a really good note to end on.
If you don't have that truth and you're both if you're butted up against each other, nobody hears anything.
I cannot ask this for the final question. For individuals, both inside and outside recovery, that want to contribute to community advocacy efforts, what would be your recommendation for them that want to get involved at some level?
The first thing I would say is that Recovery Anne Arundel meets the first Wednesday of every month in Annapolis at Heritage Baptist Church. The meeting is from 10 o'clock to 11:30. We feed you a great breakfast. There's a huge amount of networking that goes on there, and I just encourage people, come on in, man. And we need new voices, right? We need to hear what other people feel or what are their strengths?
Yeah.
Right. I like to look at people's strengths. Anytime you can find me at www.serenitysistas.org. Or you can find me at www.recoveryannarundle.org and shoot me that quick email.
And we talked about probably 10 or 15 things that Angel is a part of, and I'll make sure to put the links for all the local, state, community, organization, all the levels that she's involved with. I'll make sure that I'll put all those in the episode notes as well. So as we wrap up this insightful conversation with Angel Traynor, we extend our heartfelt gratitude for her openness and dedication to the recovery community. Angel's journey from founding Serenity Sistas Sober House to her role as a coordinator and advocate showcases the transformative power of destigmatizing addiction and community advocacy in the realm of addiction recovery. Angel has illuminated the crucial role of the continuum of care and recovery wraparound services in shaping the recovery experience. Her passion for bridging gaps within the system highlights the need for comprehensive support services tailored to address the unique challenges individuals face on their recovery journey. As we navigate the complex landscape of addiction and recovery, Angel's advocacy serves as a beacon of hope, emphasizing the collective responsibility we all share in supporting those on the path to recovery. Let's carry forward the wisdom shared today, fostering a community that uplifts and empowers each individual toward lasting well-being. How will you advocate? We encourage you to engage in local advocacy efforts and support recovery initiatives in your community. So until next time, stay well and stay connected, as collectively we can do so much. My name is Luke.
And this is all.
We'll see you next time. Thanks so much.